So the three things, if I had to boil down like success with consulting, like the three main things is like your mindset. So, a lot of people I heard mention mindset before. So, that's like your confidence. It's like your ability to take action every single day, and, also your plan and, what things you do each day and what your vision is and stuff like that. So day one today is going to be all about mindset, just the whole day, because I figured that's, it's pretty important. I would say it's where most people struggle, is just, doing what they need to do. So everyone kind of knows what they need to do, but it's just doing it that's the problem. So we're going to focus all of today on mindset. Then day two is going to be all about knowledge of the market, products and services, and specifically like retainers. So I kind of figured from when you guys went around, like everyone wants to learn a lot about retainers. Is there anyone that doesn't want to learn about retainers? Or anyone that would prefer to learn about website deals? All right, so it's pretty much going to be 99% retainers then on day two. And I'm going to run through, all the different products that I've been selling. So, when I started out with consulting, I did websites because that was just the blatantly obvious thing. And it started off at like $1,000 websites, then 1,500, then 3. Eventually, by kind of building in a funnel and everything, I was able to get it to 5, 10, 15. But as you guys have experienced, it's pretty laborsome. It's a good way to make some money. Like you can make 40, 50 grand a month sort of doing it, but you have some ups and downs because it's not recurring, and it's quite a mission to get like a deal fulfilled. Sometimes they can really drag out. And what happened is, I think I've been doing it for about 2-3 years now, and over the course of that, people, I've been behind closed doors of a lot of businesses, talked to a lot of people, and I found out that they were spending money with these other companies for SEO and AdWords and things like that, and they were spending a lot of money, and that's what kind of made me think, well, why can't I have that money? And I started looking into these companies as well, like the providers of them, because one thing I always like to do is look at, in a market, who's doing it and how much money are they making. Because if the best guy in a market isn't even making that much money, it's generally a bad opportunity. In website design, in New Zealand, I looked at all the web design shops, and I looked at the very top, and no one was making more than about $2-3 million a year. So, and that's the best, right? So that's like maxing out. And you have to grow your staff a lot. But then I started looking at the companies that were selling AdWords and SEO and things like that, and they were doing a lot. So they were doing 10 million a month, some of the companies I looked at. And this is in New Zealand. And New Zealand has 4 million people in it, by the way, which is tiny. But there was a couple of companies in New Zealand that were selling SEO and AdWords, and how much money they were making, and how much money my clients were paying them. Just it stood out to me, and so I tried to learn a lot about it, and that's been the shift I've had since I started. Most of it's been moving from websites to retainers. You still a lot of the time need to do websites because if you're going to do someone's SEO and AdWords, what you're really doing is getting them traffic, right? But if you're pointing that traffic to a bad website, then it's not going to convert well anyway. So a lot of the time we still actually have to touch these bloody websites, which is a real pain in the ass. But I've made it a rule to only touch them if they're bundled in with retainers. And a good way I've found to do that and to kind of lock people into a longer term is by quoting a site in between 5 and 10 grand, dividing it by 12, and then putting that price in with the retainer. So if it was a $12,000 website, you'd divide it by 12, there'd be $1,000 per month on top of the retainer as well. And that, it's less of a barrier to get someone to sign up, instead of saying, look, it's going to be 12 grand for the website and this every single month. But it also locks them in for a 12-month period, which has worked really well. So that's about all I'm going to mention about, retainers and that sort of stuff now. But day two is going to be all about that. So I'm going to go over each one, like SEO, exactly how we sell it, what the different prices are, and what a couple of clients, what they look like, and before and after, that sort of stuff. And then on the last day, day 3, marketing and sales skills to get customers. So, a lot more about positioning, the new sort of lumpy mail strategies that are working, and some recent things I've been doing in the business, a bit of scripting, and then sales. It's hard to portray in an online course because you're not live there and you can't really practice and get personal with someone. But a lot of what I've seen people do wrong with sales is, they just read the script word for word. And I've heard it on a couple of one-on-one calls with the guys. Like, it sounds like they're literally just reading down the script blatantly in front of the other guy. And it just doesn't work. It's just not cool. And I created the script not to be used like that, but it's kind of hard to show in an online course. So what we're going to do is, go through the scripts, kind of make them more natural to you, and show you how to use them without actually having them there in front of you and without sounding like a robot. So those are the 3 things we're going to cover across the 3 days.
Did you change the script for the retainers?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So we'll go over, we'll be covering, each product we'll kind of treat differently because they're all kind of different, but they all kind of tie together as well. They're very complementary things. So the best way to start is inside this booklet, I've got this thing called a wealth index. And I saw this thing once somewhere, and I've kind of adjusted it for consulting. So I said when you boil it down, it comes down to like 3 things. Your mindset, then the knowledge of the products and the services, and then your marketing and sales skills. These are the 3 days, and this is sort of a good way to to start off, because on a kind of gauge where everyone is at now. So I'm not going to look at this, but this is for your own personal record. We'll do one now, and then at the end of the whole thing, we'll do another one, and see if we've got any improvements. This, I think, will be a good way for you to measure. It'll also be a good way to see, where your weaknesses are now. So if you just grab it out now, we'll just fill it out quickly. So with mindset and confidence, so for each one, I'll just quickly describe what it is, and then just circle which score you think you have. 10 being, the best, or 10 being really good, 1 being the worst. So mindset and confidence first. So emotional state management, that's like, your ability to control the state of mind you're in. So you probably know that some days, you just feel like everything's going smoothly and you feel so positive and everything just happens. And some days you feel real rough. Or like, what's your ability to be able to control that, to control that? Is it completely out of your control, or do you have a good grasp on that? So that's the first one. Just give yourself a score for that. Then the next one is empowering beliefs. So this is like beliefs about yourself. So, so there's an empowering belief would be like, I'm really good at what I do. I'm really good at SEO. I'm really good at sales. I'm the best at something. A negative belief would be like, I'm not good with dealing with people. I'm not good with money. So, if you had to guess whether you had limiting beliefs or empowering beliefs, where would you sort of rank yourself there? And then vision and focus. So this is like your vision for the future. So how do you have a vision for the future, first of all? And how detailed is it? And, do you have like a vision? And then each day you focusing on making steps towards that. So give yourself a score for that. And then thermostat / high standards. So standards are like what you believe is, so a lot of people would say, I'm happy with making like $50,000 a year or something. Or some people's standards would be like, I must make 10 million. Like, how high do you think your personal standards are for income and, success with what you do? And then goals and plans. So, do you set goals? Do you have plans? How detailed are they? How well do you stick to them? Just give yourself a score. And then knowledge of products and services. So this is just, how much you know about each one of these particular things. So websites, we've talked all about them. Like, do you know what best practice is for a website? What should it have? What should it not have? What should it look like? Can you speak to a client about that? SEO, do you know what that is? Do you know much about it? What's best practice for SEO for a business? AdWords, same thing. So Google AdWords, pay-per-click, Google search. Do you know what best practice is? Do you know how to sell it? Do you know how to describe it to someone? Content and email marketing. So content and email marketing. So content marketing is like blogging, creating posts on behalf of a client, and then email marketing is like collecting leads and then dripping out a newsletter once a month or something like that. And then Facebook marketing. So this is kind of two sides. It's just having the Facebook page and posting and engaging with the audience. It's also the pay-per-click side of Facebook. And then copywriting, which is what I used to think was when you had that copyright symbol and you made something legal. I didn't know it was such a big thing. I was like, God, everyone's obsessed with this stuff. But I later found out that it means like how good you are at writing words to sell things. Yeah. And then marketing and sales. So positioning, like how do you think your positioning is in your business and in your market with what you do? Do you think you're positioned well? Do you think you're different from the competition? Do you think you're more authoritative than the competition? Or do you think it could do with a lot of work? And then marketing skills. So how good are you at sending out, marketing things, generating leads? So the process that happens before the sales process starts, marketing. And then sales. So once the marketing sort of generated the lead, how good are you at understanding a client's needs, talking to them and selling them, getting them across the line, collecting the money, closing the deal? So after you've done all of those, total each section and then total the entire thing and give yourself a score out of 98. So I tried to make this thing add up to 100, but I just couldn't seem to get it to work. So it's 98, and 2% of it I just figured we could call luck. So, what the hell is this thing? Why am I getting you to do it? Well, I think it's a really good way. I said the three biggest things I see with consulting is mindset, knowledge of the products and services, and your marketing and sales skills. And I think that you can measure these things. You can grade them, and obviously the mindset stuff and the marketing and sales stuff is more important. That's why it's given more points than the others, but it's still very important to actually know what the products are about. So I've got a sales rep inside my business at the moment, and he's really good at everything else, but he's kind of a bit too cocky to even learn about the products, and it really makes, it's really bad. I've realized that even if you are a very good salesman and you've got a lot of confidence and everything, you still need to know what the hell you're talking about. And sometimes I listen to him say things about AdWords and I'm like just shaking my head. But it still seems to work. But I think it's really important to know what you're talking about. I've found recently in my business, now that I've started, it was hard for me to talk about these things, but when I really sort of understood a best practice and a way to describe each one of these different products to clients, they were almost sold because they saw me as describing it to them better than they've ever heard it from anyone else. making them understand it, and that really helped close the deal. So I've thought about it a lot, and I think, you know, really knowing what it is that we do is quite important. I used to think it was more marketing and sales and mindset, but it is important, and that's why day 2 I'm gonna go over each one of these things. So we've got one done now, and then at the end, before we leave, we'll do another one and see if we've helped you improve on these things. Now,
but if you fall down in any of these, so if you know products and services really well, and mindset is fine, but marketing and sales is useless, then you still know where to go, right? Because then you have the right mindset, you have all of this knowledge, but you can't sell it, so
yeah.
you're screwed, right?
Yeah. So any sort of weak point in here is gonna hurt. So the next point I had was like, where are your weak spots? You know, like I've got a sales rep he's confident, he takes action, he's good at marketing and sales, but you know, he's not too strong on the products and services. It makes a big difference. Whereas, you know, the contractors I use to do this are geniuses in each one of these things, but their mindset and marketing and sales skills aren't right, and that's why they work for me. And, you know, it is important to have, you know, all three. So the point I've made next is like, where are your weak spots? So if you look at it now, you know, where do you think your weak spot is? Where's the chink in your armor? So we get a couple of people to say which area they think they're weak at, what area they'd like to improve.
Just knowledge of products around AdWords and SEO and Facebook marketing, because I've never done it.
Who's weakest in the knowledge of products area? Okay. And then what about mindset? Who's weak there? Oh, surprising. And then marketing and sales? All right, so it's...
Well, I got one thing. I don't know if I'm weak in it yet because I've not really jumped into it yet.
I think the marketing and sales are almost slightly different skill sets too. I mean, if you put me in a room with someone qualified, I can usually close a deal. My problem is just getting in the room.
Yeah, so that's marketing, right? Yeah.
Marketing and sales is the big thing. Marketing and sales is the hardest part of anything.
Yeah.
Because you figured out how to do it with lumpy mail, right place.
So lumpy mail, I think, you know, a lot of people, like, we've obsessed about it a lot, but I think the process once you've got someone interested is much more important, because anyone can get someone interested. If anyone sends enough things, someone will be interested, right? And then I think the most important part, first of all, is having the right mindset to take the action, because that's going to get the things out the door and get people interested. But once they're interested, you know, you really need to be able to take someone from just kind of putting their hand up to be able to turn them into a client, you know. So what I've kind of done is, how each lesson will be taught, well, day 1's mindset, day 2's marketing products, day 3 sales and marketing. And then each day there'll be sort of 5 to 6 points. They're all around the things that we had in the wealth index. So if you looked under mindset, you know, there's multiple different points. So that's kind of what we're going to break each lesson into. It's like the things below each category in the wealth index, and then how to improve each one. So that, you know, when you leave, you can be, you know, right on the right side. So 5 to 6 lessons per day, and they'll run for about 1 hour. So I'll start, you know, with introducing it, and then an explanation, some real life examples and things from my own business, and then an activity for you guys to, you know, put it into plan for when you leave. So I want to make this like a workshop, not just me talking the whole time, but, you know, I want you guys to take notes on, that's why I've printed it all out, you know, take notes, and then there'll be pieces where you can actually, you know, customize it for yourself, and you can take it away and you've got something to do when you leave. And then towards the end of each lesson, which will be about an hour each, we'll do a bit of Q&A. So if you've got any questions as we go through each lesson, just write them down on your notes, and we'll have a little stop for Q&A, and then, you know, we'll stand up, because it's, you know, it's a whole day. We want to, each hour I want everyone to just kind of end with a bit of Q&A, stand up, and then we'll jump on to the next one. So that's that. Now we can jump into mindset. So I'm going to start off with an introduction to mindset, then the emotional state management, which is, you know, these are all the things I listed on the Wealth Index. Beliefs, then we're going to break for lunch around 12, might be, times aren't exact. Then 1 p.m. we're going to talk about, you know, your thermostat, your high standards or your low standards, vision and focus, and then goals and plans, and then 4 p.m. networking and drinks. So an introduction to mindset. So who's watched the mindset video on the online course? It's pretty much everyone. Cool. So you're already kind of familiar with it. So I just wanted to cover it, just an introduction to mindset. I won't go too detailed on it because you've already seen the video. But, you know, it's basically how your brain works. So people in the world, I've found that most people that aren't successful, they just don't understand how their brain works. They think that, you know, what it is just what it is, right? And, you know, successful people really understand how their brain works, and they're able to see things, and they feel a sudden emotion, like they might see something happen, panic, but then they can catch themselves in that panic and go and talk themselves out of it, and that, you know, that's what enables them to keep moving forward. So with, you know, how your brain works, so something happens. So, you know, good things and bad things, and it's inevitable that, you know, bad things are gonna happen. And, you know, then the next thing you do is you take in the information, so you either see it happen or you listen to it happen, whatever it is. And this stuff is like real, so something actually does happen, and then you do take in the information with your eyes and your ears, and that's the real side of it. But then it turns into this other process, which is, you know, the mindset process, which is kind of how your brain processes that and adds meaning to it. So the next thing your brain does after it takes in the stimulus is it processes that information, and then it forms a belief on something. So, you know, if you saw a car crash, and, you know, your brain sees that happens, the car crashed, you could say to yourself, you know, cars are dangerous, and then, you know, that's how if you would say to yourself inside your head, like, cars are dangerous, and that's the assumption you made from that thing in real life, then you started to feel nervous around that. You'd add emotion to that belief that you had, and that kind of forms your belief on that sort of thing happening in the world. So the next time you walk towards a car, you know, you immediately start to feel that bad emotion, and you immediately start to think cars are dangerous. Whereas someone else could see the exact same thing happen in the world, in the car crash, and they would say, oh, you know, that's just driver error, and kind of just forget about it. And they're two people, they saw the exact same thing happen, the same reality, but, you know, they didn't, the way they processed it and assigned, you know, emotion to it was completely different. So that's the thing about, you know, your brain. It's, people see things differently, they assign meaning to it, and what it basically means is, you know, it's, bad things are always going to happen, but you're having a good mindset in business is, you know, how you form a belief on what happened and what emotion you assign to that. So that's, you know, the process. And the secret to mindset really is to, you know, your own perception is your reality. So it's, you know, you've got successful people know, like, bad things are going to happen, and they happen, but then the way they understand it and the way they add emotion to it is completely different. So in business, some classic ones would be when you were younger, and, you know, your parents might have told you, don't talk to strangers, talking to strangers is bad. So you heard that was, you know, that was a fact. Your parents said that to you. You heard it, it went into your brain, you said that to yourself, you formed that belief, and then you assign some emotion to that. So now you go to make follow-up calls on the phone, and it's completely different. I mean, follow-up calls is, you know, business. Talking to strangers is completely different, and there's years down the track. But what your brain does is immediately before you pick up the phone, it's sensing those emotions, and that decision that you made earlier on in your childhood. So that's, that's how powerful, mindset is. It's the way you perceive something and assign emotion to it. That is what your reality will become. And who here has problems with, who here has a fear of sort of talking to strangers or following up or things like that? Who has a fear like that? Okay. And does this stuff sort of make sense? So it does make sense, cool. Because sometimes when I first read this stuff, I was a bit weirded out. I felt like it was mindset stuff converge on a little bit creepy. So I've tried not to go, we're not going to do any yoga or meditation or anything in here. But that stuff, I'm not dissing that stuff, it might work, but I'm going to keep this fact-based. Now, how beliefs are strengthened. So I told you, you see something happen, you assign meaning to it, you make a decision on it, then you attach emotion to it. Well, each time you replay that in your head, it's the same as it was in reality. So you can probably remember a time in your life that you did something and it was embarrassing. You might have, said something stupid and people laughed or something like that. You might have fallen over on stage. I don't know, it's just something embarrassing. And when it happened at the time, it felt bad. You're like, geez, that was embarrassing, and you assign some embarrassment emotion to it. But when you replay it in your head, just time and time and time again, you still feel that same emotion as if it happened again in real life. Does that make sense? So when you replay something in your brain doesn't know the difference between something that actually happened in real life, like an actual fact, and something that you're just replaying in your mind. So if you do see a car crash, that was my example before, and you see it happen in real life, if you replay that in your mind, it's still going to be very realistic, and your brain won't know the difference, and it will just be like you've seen another one and another one and another one. And what happens is over time, your brain kind of has a scale like this one here, and each time it's kind of like you've got good rocks and bad rocks, and you have a different scale for every different belief. Like talking to strangers, it might be getting into cars or whatever. Every time you play it in your head and you assign emotion to it, it's kind of like adding a rock to one side of the scale or the other. And if you have if your mindset is fear-oriented around different things, then it's probably because you have, assigned more bad rocks to it than good ones. And often it really bewilders people because they think, how can that happen? Because I've only seen that happen once. I only saw a car crash once. And in your logical brain, it doesn't make any sense. But the truth is you've replayed it in your head so many times. Each time you replay it in your head, it's the same thing as if it happened in real life. And you've really skewed your belief on that. So that is basically what your mindset is and how it works. And the trick is to first of all understand that this is how my brain works, and I get that this is how my brain works. And the trick is to catch yourself when something happens or when you're playing something in your head. The trick is I don't think you can really stop yourself from doing that. Even still today, it happens to me. But what I've gotten good at is just freezing it and being like, no, that's just silly. You know what I mean? So that's what I think a really strong mindset is, and it's also being able to audit yourself on your mindset. Say, these are the limiting beliefs that are holding me back. This is what I think caused this, and I've replayed it in my head. That's why there's more negative rocks than positive rocks, and then put a process in action to fix that. Because when I started out, I always whenever I had to do calls, I don't think I've ever said this before, but I used to go and have about 4 or 5 beers before I had to make follow-up calls. So I'd wake up. Wasn't a healthy sort of period. Especially if someone said they wanted a consultation because I was over the limit. So I used, that's how bad it was, for me, and I think it's like that for honestly a lot of people, it's extremely rare to actually just have no limiting beliefs and go out into business with a completely positive mindset and just be able to do whatever you want. Like, that's insanely rare, and mine was, so bad that, I had to pretty much get drunk to do it. And even then it was still hard, So I don't think anyone, there are a couple of people that just will naturally be able to do it, but for most people it's a struggle. And, what today's going to be about is figuring out what those things are that are holding you back, and then, putting a process in action to fix it, because it can be fixed. I did it to my own mindset. I don't have to drink 5 or 6 beers anymore to follow up. And I had a lot of limiting beliefs about failure, about fear of rejection, about talking to strangers, not being good enough, tons of things, and we're going to go over a lot of those today. So, like I've said, this is the only part that forms beliefs, the last 2 little bits. That's what's important, not so much the actual fact. And your brain doesn't know the difference between something that actually happened or something that's imagined. And does that make sense to you guys? Because some people sometimes say, but it does. And it's true, it does, but when forming beliefs, it doesn't know the difference. So, the trick is to hijack the process and, intervene in this last little spot. So it's to catch yourself when you're thinking it and, stop it and think of it positive instead of in a negative way. So how do you do this? If you've replayed over in your head, talking to strangers is bad, and you've formed this belief for like 20 years. Well, how do you rewind that? How do you fix it? Well, like I said, your brain doesn't really know the difference between something that happened in real life and something that was imagined. So the trick is to make your imagination your training ground. So the trick is to play more business or play more sport or play more scenarios or situations in your imagination than you do in real life, if the ones in real life aren't going that well, so you can skew it to the good side. So in business, especially when you start out, like making follow-up calls, closing deals and doing everything, it's a bit hard, and you're not going to get success immediately, and so you're naturally going to have more negative rocks when you start. I remember the first cold call I ever made, the guy just hung up on me, and I let that build for weeks, and that really just made it a whole lot worse. Because that one time I was already nervous, it went bad, and then it got a whole lot worse. And when you start out, it's inevitably going to be a bit rough. So the trick is to play a lot of good scenarios in your imagination. And a lot of famous people do this, like athletes, business people, and everything like that. Like I remember Michael Jordan said that he shot more 3-pointers in his imagination than he ever did in real life, because in his imagination every single 3-pointer just went straight through the hoop, and he would just imagine like himself on the line holding the ball, how he shot it, how he jumped, how it went through, and then he would assign good emotion to it. So then, because if he was playing in real life and training, a lot of them are going to miss. So how he really changed his belief was in his imagination, because every time in your imagination can go right if you do it the right way. And now when he'd run to the 3-point line, grab the ball, his brain's immediate reaction was, this is going to go well, this is good, this is like a positive thing. Whereas if he hadn't trained his imagination, and in real life a lot of these 3-pointer shots didn't go through, the second he would catch the ball, it wouldn't be good. He'd panic. Does that make sense? So yeah, your imagination is, your training ground. And I've got Jordan here, Tiger Woods, he said the exact same thing. You guys can even Google this. There's like interviews of of these guys talking about it. When you get into the professional league in business and in sport especially, like the physical body can't really go much harder. Like it's maxing out. And the only way to really compete is it just becomes mental. In the top tier of sports and the top tier of a lot of things, the skills are the same, the hours in the day are the same, the amount of training you can do is the same, the sort of food and nutrients you can take in is the same, and the last bit just becomes all mental. And pretty much every successful businessman or sportsman will have their mental side really, really, really sharp. So that's kind of like an overview of mindset, like just a quick introduction to it. And then these are the different elements that I think make up mindset. And we're going to cover each one of these today as a different lesson. So there's state management, empowering beliefs, vision and focus, high standards, good habits, and goals and plans. And these were the things that you guys graded yourself on in the Wealth Index. So that's, the introduction to mindset. We got any questions at the moment? None?
When you're doing this mental practice, do you find that your mind are you struggling to imagine it being a good result versus taking the negative route? Or is it pretty easy to just...
When you start, definitely. So I remember the first time I sort of lay down to do this, your brain naturally thinks, like, what the hell am I doing? Like you kind of feel like a bit of a fool, or like you're being suckered into some mysterious thing. But that in itself is a limiting belief about mental sort of stuff. A lot of people say, the world just happens to you. You can't do anything about it. And that's what makes you believe that when you go to do something like this, like reverse limiting belief, that it's all, hippie sort of stuff. You know what I mean? So that's why the mindset stuff's so powerful. And when you start out, it's hard to do. It definitely is. And I'm going to show you exactly how to do it so that it works for you. But it's basically got to do with, playing the scenario, so sort of saying a sentence to yourself like, I am good at sales. Or I feel good when I call strangers on the phone, something like that. So you say it, and then you've got to, it's not just saying it. If you just say it, and that's what a lot of people do, they just sort of lie there and they just might say it to themselves. That really doesn't do much at all. What you have to do is imagine a scenario of a sale going well. And you have to assign detail to it, because that's how your brain works. It's not logical, it's all emotional. So you have to say it to yourself, and then, so that's the logical step. Then you have to imagine it in detail. So, you've got to assign different things to it. So a color, like features of a person, voice, things that your brain imagines, or that's how it adds detail. And then the next step is to then assign emotion to it. So you close the deal, or you called a stranger, you've seen it in your imagination, then the next step is, it went well, what emotion do you feel when it goes well? And the feeling, you've kind of got to let the feeling go through your body, because that's then what really strengthens that. Yeah, so that's the process. I mean, we'll go over it in more detail now, but when you start out, it is difficult, but it does get, a lot easier.
How long did it take you to go from 5 beers a day to no beers a day?
So the beers thing only really did last for like a month, not because it wasn't working, just because it was a pretty bad habit, Like, it was I was sitting in a garage, like I just left my job, and I felt pretty low that in my, I was just getting drunk to even have to do any work. So that's why I never said it before, because it's not a good strategy. And I don't want anyone else copying it, and because it's not a good way to deal with things in life, is just to get drunk. It's a really bad way to deal with things. And I stopped doing it, and there was actually much more powerful things you can do than that. So that's why I never mentioned it. But I stopped doing the beers thing probably after a month, and then it probably took another sort of 4 or 5 months till it really became easier. And, you know, I think that's the thing, it takes time. So a lot of people think, oh, I'll do this mindset stuff and all of a sudden it's just going to become easy. Like in 10 days or something, I'm going to go to pick up the phone and I won't feel any negative emotion. It's not really like that. It takes time, but it does work. And one thing you can't do, one big mistake I've seen a lot of people make is thinking that they can just do the mindset side and forget the action, and eventually they'll be able to take the action without any resistance. So that's a big mistake. Like, that will never happen. You have to be taking the action and doing the mindset stuff as well. So it's not like a cure, it's more of like, you know, it's the only way to really do it, you know what I mean? And when it's kind of like when you get your first deal kind of go well and you're doing the mindset stuff, all of a sudden just this big shift happens. So it takes time, but you know, there really is like no other option when it comes to this sort of stuff. Like, and this really does help. So, you know, not doing it is definitely not a good way to go about it. When I really conquered mindset, I think that's when I made, you know, a huge jump in business. Yeah.
Is it something that you just do every day as you go about your daily life, or do you actually spend time sitting down each day and actually reflecting on it? So how long?
So I used to do it every single morning and every night. Like before I went to bed, I'd pull out something from underneath, I'd had it typed out and pull it out from underneath my pillow and read it. And I think that's really good to do. But, you know, over the course of like 3 years now, it's kind of just turned natural to, I don't need it typed out or anything. It's just when it comes up in my life, I can play that positive reel that I'd stored in my head. So, you know, I don't pull out the printed thing and read it every night before bed. I probably should. Like, I reckon my mindset would be a whole lot better if I still did that. You know, I've fallen for my own advice as well. Like, I did it solidly for about a year, and it made massive difference. And I think if I had still done it till today, like, I'd be much further on than where I am now. And as I was like preparing for this thing, like it got me really excited because I was like, you know, there's a lot of things I've forgotten as well. What was the question?
How long did you go for?
Yeah, so every morning and night for about a year, and I still do it today, but not kind of morning and night, more just running the reel throughout the day. Yeah.
And how long for each time, roughly?
Used to take me like 20 minutes to read through my whole list of things and play the imagination. Yeah. Yeah.
How did you come across this process, and how did you believe in it during the initial months when it's hard to see the results?
Yeah. So, like, I had been trying to take action and knew nothing about mindset, right? And I logically knew what I was doing, like, and I logically knew that there was nothing wrong with calling a stranger and sending out packages to a stranger, like, but there was just this like thing holding me back. Do you know what I mean? And I had no idea what it was because I'd never heard of mindset or psychology or how your brain works or anything. And then I think it was just by chance that I stumbled across like books and stuff on this sort of stuff. And when I read it, it really made sense because it was like, you know, people sort of, they know what they should be doing. They know there's nothing wrong with calling strangers and sending packages to strangers and things like that. But something holds them back. And when you've been taking action and feeling that pain, and then you finally read it in a book and you see different scenarios, you're like, wow, this makes sense, you know? Whereas if you'd read that book and you hadn't been taking the action and feeling the pain, you probably wouldn't understand. So the books that I read were, one of them was called Think and Grow Rich. That's a really good book by Napoleon Hill. Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. And, you know, I really got stuck into the stuff when I found out about it. I started like finding out why the book was written and all of the stuff, because I always test things. I'm like, is this bullshit or is this real? And the psycho-cybernetics one was really good because Maxwell Maltz was a plastic surgeon in New York, and he would operate on a lot of people, and a lot of people would come in and they might have like a disfigured face or something through an accident or something like that. And they had this self-image of themselves and this belief of themselves. And it was based on fact because, you know, they had a disfigured face or something. And then he had fixed them. And most of the people still felt like they had something wrong. Like they still felt like they were like that. But the fact was that the face was fixed, you know what I mean? And it drove him nuts. So this is way back before anyone kind of did any studies on this stuff or anything. And he quit being a plastic surgeon and just dedicated the rest of his life to figuring out why this happened. Yeah. And that's how the book was written. It was all about, like, you know, your self-image of yourself isn't real. Like, you know, these people, like, you might not be good at sales, for example. Then you go to a seminar and you learn about sales, and you're actually good at sales now. But you still don't think you're good at sales, so you don't use it, right? And, you know, if someone, like, with a disfigured face, it gets fixed, then they now have no problem. Like, the reality is improved, but their perception of it is still flawed. And it's the same sort of thing in business, you know. If you go through, I think it's the biggest thing that holds people back, like, because the reality is, like, you know, this stuff works, you know, we've seen it work and everything, and you can learn how to be good at sales, and you can learn about products and services, and you can learn how to do a consultation. You can do all of this stuff, but your belief about yourself being good at it is a whole other thing. So, yeah, I went down a massive rabbit hole in learning about this stuff. And then I actually found out that, has anyone heard of Dan Kennedy? Yeah. So, Dan Kennedy was, when he was really young, he learned all about direct response marketing and sales and everything. And he was smart. He knew he was smart. He knew he was good at what he was in his trade. But he just couldn't do it. Like, there was that barrier. And then he read the book, Psycho-Cybernetics. And then it completely changed his life, so much so that he ended up rewriting a copy of that book. And it's called Zero Resistance Selling. So Psycho-Cybernetics is all about, you know, just how the mind works in general, with no specific application to business. But Dan Kennedy read it, applied it to business, sales and especially, and business mindset especially, and decided to rewrite the book in a business focus. And that was how the book Zero Resistance Selling came about, which was, it says on the book, Dan Kennedy and Maxwell Maltz. Yeah. So, yeah, I went, that's how much research I did, right? I just didn't read the book. I know how they came about and who rewrote what, and you know what I mean? So I really got stuck into that, and that's how I discovered all that information.
What did you learn from your mentors on how do they apply or practice mindset?
So, when it comes to mindset, I find like I haven't really had any mentors that have even sort of thought about it, you know what I mean? Or they have thought about it, but it's been kind of a bit too airy for me, because I like, you know, there's a fine line between understanding this stuff and then obsessing about it and blaming it for everything in your life, you know what I mean? And then just joining groups and you know, like just eating, like even you think the fruit is going to like have a difference, and like some people get really wound up in this stuff and do meditation, and I'm not saying that stuff's bad, but there's a fine line, I think, with this mindset stuff when you've gone a bit too far. And I've found that, you know, my mentor that's really successful, he hasn't done this stuff consciously. Like, he didn't read the books and he didn't make it a process and he didn't do it, but he's actually done it himself without knowing, you know what I mean? So he knows he's good. He's made himself a good self-image. So no real mentors have helped me a lot with this. It's just mostly books and personal experience, and then just trying to put it into this information. Yeah. Anything else?
You mentioned that you catch that thought, like a bad thought.
Mhm.
Can you just quickly talk? So you catch the thought and then you deal with it.
Yeah. So, like, if you're, for example, if you're going to, if you're at an event, like if you're at, say, an event like this, and there's someone you really wanted to meet, and they're standing over there, and the first thought you get is fear, like you feel it, right? And it kind of plays in your head, and well, I can kind of freeze that and go, now I know that behind every feeling like that, the way I think about it in my head is, behind anything really uncomfortable is something really, really, really good. Yeah. So whenever I feel that emotion, I'm like, I found something good. And I just got to go over it, and there's the prize. And it's always like that. So everything in life I find that's really good is hidden behind this uncomfort. So when I feel it, it's now, instead of becoming a mechanism to not do it, it's now become a mechanism to detect what I should actually be doing and what I shouldn't. Like, when you're constantly feeling that, like every day, and it's a really good sign. It means that you're really making steps forward. If you're never uncomfortable, like, you're not really pushing hard enough. Yeah, I kind of do it a bit too much now, like, yeah. All right, well, let's move on to the next thing. So, emotional state management. So, this is like the good day, bad day stuff. So I'm sure some days are just like you feel like you're just on a roll, and you get more done in one day than you've done in the past 2 weeks. And also what happens is I don't think there's any real evidence to this other than if you look at people that are really successful. But it's like when you're on a positive roll, and when you're on a roll, like, good things start to just kind of attract. And when you're on a bad roll, like, the bad things kind of start to attract. Does that make sense? I know it happens to me. I mean, it happened to me when I flew over here. I'd had about 2 hours sleep, and then I got to the airport, and the lady that was checking my things in was just really annoying, and then I got to the lounge, and my pass had expired, and I couldn't get in there, and then I finally got let in, and then I went and got some food, and they wouldn't let me in with the food, and then then I got here, and I had to, I went to pay, and my credit card had been locked for fraud protection because I'd moved over, and I was just like, how much more of this shit is going to happen? Because I was like, I need to upload this video and go to sleep. And then, finally get up to the room and create the video, and then go to upload it, and it said upload time 650 minutes. And this was at midnight, and I hadn't slept for like 30 hours at that point. So I had to then plug, I called the receptionist, and they were all like, there's nothing we can do, sir. And so then I ended up plugging my phone in and tethering it, because that internet was faster. And then, had to upload a 1.4 gig video through tethered internet. But then my data package was only 1 gig, and I called Vodafone back home, and to do that, I couldn't even use my phone because it was already tethering, and so I had to use another laptop, Skype, and then got through to them, and they said, sir, we can only add them in 1 gig bundles, we can't add 2, and my video was 1.5 gigs. And so I had to call them at the exact moment that ran out, and they added another one, and I ended up going to bed at 6 a.m. And then, that was just, it was like it just kept going, you know what I mean? And I swear, the reason why that happened is just because I was in a really, really bad mood. And the things I was saying to myself, in my head, were just not very good. And when you start doing that, it just keeps coming, you know what I mean? And it's not till I went to sleep and I was finally happy that I'd achieved that, and I had a better outlook the next day that things all started to happen good again. You know, like I went to the T-Mobile store and they gave me this little thing, and now it's faster than the internet is back home. Like, and you know, then everything good started to happen. So, you know, your emotional state management is like, I think it's very important, because it's kind of like the laws of the universe. If you say bad things to yourself and you're in a bad mood, you're just going to keep attracting shit, and it's not fun, because you know, it happened to me recently. And when you're on a good roll, it's like, you know, everything good starts to happen. Like, I found that if I win a deal, like a big one, then all of a sudden, like, my whole brain changes and I just win lots of them because of, like, the way I'm thinking. So the best time to take action is, like, immediately off a success. Like, when you're on a roll, like, don't let it go, because that's, like, the best time to be doing stuff. And when you're in a bad state, you know, you've just got to change it back around, and that's what, you know, this little topic here is going to be about. So, you know, your emotional state management is how you feel in the moment, and certain emotional states that lead to wealth and success are, you know, these sorts of states. There's certainty, so you're certain in what you're doing. It's just, you know this is what you're going to do. Clarity, confidence, faith, and like patience. So these are like good states. And then bad ones are, you know, these are the states that lead to poverty and failure. It's like uncertainty, greed, fear, or overwhelm. So overwhelm and fear and uncertainty are probably like the big ones. And I know for myself, in the recent year, the biggest one for me has been overwhelm. So every morning I get into the office, there's like 9 people waiting to like come in and rob my whole day. And there's just emails, and there's just so much stuff, and I've got to be very careful that the first thing that happens in the morning isn't turning me into a bad state, because often, you know, it's like people say if you have a bad morning, like, you know, your whole day is real bad. So emotional state management is, you know, really important. So I've written here, the state you're in right now determines how you'll respond to the environment around you. When you're in an empowered state, you can access resources, and when you're in a disempowered state, you don't feel like you have any resources at all. So when you're feeling down and uncertain and overwhelmed, you feel like you've got nothing. You feel like it's just hopeless, right? But when you're in a good state, you've got access to every asset in your brain. Like, you can access all of those things. You can access the information you need. But when you're overwhelmed and you're in a rut, it's like you can't even get to that stuff. It's just like it feels hopeless. So, you know, it's all about how you feel in the moment, and, you know, how you know, yeah. So a quick, thinking back exercise. So what I've found is, if you think back to good experiences and bad experiences, there's lots of senses that you can associate to them. So if I think back to like some really good experiences, I can almost kind of, you know, you feel the emotion that was felt at the time, and sometimes you can even relate a smell. Does anyone get the smell one? So if there was a time when you were really clear, like you could kind of feel what your body felt like, or there might have been like a smell that you felt or something like that. Like when you have either a good experience or a bad experience, it's not just the logical thing that happened, it's like all the other detail around it. So a quick exercise, if you just, you know, think of a really good experience that happened in your past and then a really bad experience, and see if you can sort of list a couple of the senses or things that, you know, you can remember. Could you remember a smell, like a touch, a feeling, or, you know, anything like that? Just write it down. They could have done a better job at setting this up. Has everyone got something down? So were you guys able to actually remember a sense, like, or was it that quite hard exercise to do?